Alright, hello. This is a slightly different video. Like right now I'm not gonna do any gameplay or any stuff like that or random things. Okay, so this is basically just a simple JavaScript tutorial about arrays because, well, I just feel I feel the need to make this because I know that a lot of new developers, myself included, don't really understand how arrays or objects work at the start and like actively avoid them like the plague and just do everything manually. So basically here I'm gonna show what arrays actually are good for. But to demonstrate things, let's say you want to display a list of names of people. So we could make like a let name 1 is well, let's just say John, because you know John Smith. Name 2 Jane, like Jane Doe, and name 3 and so on. So like whatever we want to call it. Anyway, so we have a list of names, and now let's say that we want to display them. So what we could do is we could make a p element here and give it an ID of, let's say, names. And well, right now we would be getting nothing, just an empty screen, obviously, since there's nothing here. But what we can do here in the code is to document. So the document is basically the entire index element. So everything here is the document. So we can in JavaScript find it and manipulate it. We can do query selector, which basically you give an argument like an ID or a class, and it will find you what you're looking for, the element that has the corresponding ID or class or whatever. You can actually do a lot of things with query selector, but I personally only use it for IDs and classes, since you don't really need any complex query selections, at least in, you know, small regular projects. So anyway, we can do names because we called it that. It has the ID of names. It's a paragraph element. And now we could just manipulate it immediately here, like dot text content, which is how you assign text to an element. Or we can do something smarter and make it a variable. You can use var, let, or const, it doesn't matter. I like using const just for the color. And well, basically a constant variable can't be changed unless it's an array, object, or an element. Okay, so how a constant variable works is that basically you can't manipulate it itself, but you can manipulate its content. Like if it has some sub content in it, you can manipulate that, but you can't really change it much. So anyway, when you're declaring an element, you can use a const. It really doesn't matter. But well, just to be simple, I'll call it a let. So let name is this. And now that we've done this, we don't have to, you know, keep doing document.querySelector every time we want to do anything with it. We can just do this. And now what we could do is names.textContent. Then we do an additive assign. So basically, if you assign something with the equal sign, that basically means this this value is now this other value. But if you add a plus sign to it, it means this value is now the old value plus whatever you're putting here. So you could do it like this. And this is how it was done before, but you don't have to. You can do this. You can just, well, names.example. And now we can basically just assign a variable to it, name1. And if we go back to here, you need to refresh it. So basically now it displays John, the one name we put in, and we could keep repeating this process, adding more and more. Name 2, name 3, and if we go back, we've got them all. They are displaying, but that's ugly. They are not displaying correctly because, you know, they're all in one string. They're all in one paragraph element. So what we could do is make more of these and just call them name1, name2, name3, and then basically do well, we could do let name1 p, because p element is this, and search that, and then we could just repeat the same process, name2, name3, name2, name3, and we could then do it like this. And this would give us a list of names, just like we want. However, this is really annoying to do, because we have to basically assign everything multiple times. We need to create 3 variables. We need to get 3 different elements to assign them something. We could skip this step and just assign immediately here using these ones. However, then we have to keep repeating the same thing over and over again if we want to assign more things. So this is really inefficient and not fun to use. So basically the best way that I would say you could do this is with an array. Or an object if you want that, but an array is probably better for a simple list. And a lot of things actually. So anyway, a better way is we create a div called names. It doesn't really matter what you call it, and you can even use a class. You don't have to use an ID, but ID should be simpler to use. So anyway, just call it names or whatever. And it's gonna be empty. Then in JavaScript, what we can do now is, instead of doing this, which is dumb, we can do this. Let names is an array. And now we can create values inside of this array. You see? Like so. And now we don't need any of this anymore. So basically now we have an array. And what we can do with an array is go through it. We need to iterate it. We can't just say like name1, you know, if we still had the variable, if name1 is names. We can't do that because we can't really assign an array to things. We need to instead use the array. So one thing you can do now that would already be better than the last time is you could simply like, well, call, let's say you want, this is, let's say that this is the document.querySelector. I'm not gonna type it out, but still, let's pretend. And now you want to assign the text content to be names 0, because computers start from 0. The first item on an array is index 0. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Like if you want to get the last element, the last thing of your array, the last item, that's actually length -1, because it's 0, 1, 2, even though you would count it 1, 2, 3. So you could do this, and now you've stored them all in one variable, which is obviously better, since it's much easier to manage that. But we'd still have to do this 3 times. We'd still have to assign the same thing 3 times. So here's the thing. What we can do is use for loops. The most used one is basically this. Let I, I'm not sure why it's called an I, an index, and I for index. So anyway, we create I, and we assign it a value of 0. Yeah, you would naturally start counting at 1, but as I said before, a computer starts counting at 0, so it has to be at 0. And then we do, it iterates until it is as big as names.length, and then it will go through things. Well, it will stop when it reaches the length, so it will go through 0, 1, 2, and then on the third one it won't do anything because it has already reached the end. And now what we can do is find names, document dot query selector names, and now we can assign it something. Now here's something a little bit more advanced, what I like doing. We can make a name by doing document.create element. So basically document create element is essentially the same as creating a tag in HTML. just like how you would type p tag, and that's how you get a p element. You type in JavaScript create element p for the element type, and this is now a p tag. And next we're going to do name.textContent. So as I said before, text content is the text of the actual element, and now we can assign it names indexed with I, because here's the thing. Okay, so an array counts from 0 to, well, its end, and this, for example, is indexing the array's 0 position, so the first item. And since our index, or I, here starts at 0 and loops through everything, it basically means here, this line means assign this to this. So it assigns the first name on the list to our new element that we just created. And then we're going to do append. Append basically means that it adds a new element to the end of another element. So to visualize it for HTML, so let's say we have an empty div here and we want to append something to it. What would happen is this. It just adds it as its child. So this is the parent element, this is the child. This is what it's going to look like after our loop finishes. I'm going to show you now. We do append name, and if we go back into our the index to the website and refresh it, we see that it still displays everything, even though we're no longer assigning these variables, these values, to these ones. So if we delete all of these paragraphs and just leave this empty div, we'll still get all three of the names. And that's how you do a for loop. Now there are actually many ways to do a for loop. Another way is to do for let, let's say, name of names. This basically does the same thing, except you're not getting the index. So this is preferable if you don't need the index for anything. But it can still be simpler for a new person to just use this, because this is probably the easiest for loop there is. So then we can basically use it the same way as this other one, except we're not doing names I, we're actually using name immediately. And we can't call this name, so we'll just call it name element. And name element here. And now we should be getting more of these paragraphs. And yeah, now we're getting two lists. Then another way that to do this is for each, but I'm not getting into that because that's an arrow function. It's too, well, complex for a new developer to really get involved with. But here's what you should definitely start using: arrays and for loops. You can loop through the entire array and immediately use any value in it without having to type it out, manually. Yeah, expanding this is really easy. You just type out more strings, or well, names. But yeah, every piece here is a string. So you just type out more of them, and they will keep showing up. So we can type out name1, name2, Henry, whatever we want, and they're all going to appear here. Boom. And that's why you should use arrays. But here's the thing. You might not use an array because you need multiple values for the same thing. Well, what you can do is, let's say we create an array and we want to save surname and first name so we can display them separately. Well, what we can do is create an object inside of the array, call one value name, say John, and another one surname, Smith. And we can still iterate through it the same way as this here, but instead we would be, well, calling array I dot name. And we could even go one bit deeper and do array I dot surname, and this will give us John Smith. So yeah, that's why you should be using arrays They're much better than just making a ton of variables, and for loops are really not that difficult. You just need to get comfortable with them. So yeah, this is just one thing that has personally, really irritated me about coding when I was beginning still, because I couldn't really understand how arrays worked, so I didn't use them. I just stored everything manually, and that is a massive pain in the ass. Don't do that. Just use an array, iterate through it. You'll have a much better time.